there are two resources that every single film needs more of: money and time.
What the is going on?
But I want the Fantastic Four now.
All right, enough, all of you.
I didn't say anything. That's not fair.
Hey everyone, I'm senior video producer Jeff McCobb, and we are back with another CinemaBlend roundtable debate because Disney just announced a slew of films that will be pushed back on the release schedule, and these films include Black Widow, Eternals, and Shang Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Lucky us.
Those ones are important to us because, you know, we're geeky as hell here in CinemaBlend, so I wanted to get events editor Eric Eisenberg and managing director Sean O'Connell on a call to gauge whether or not this is good for the MCU and what it means for the future. I'm gonna start with events editor Eric Eisenberg. Bro, what does this mean for the MCU, and is this a good thing, these release date pushbacks?
I frankly think that it is almost entirely a good thing. Obviously, fans are being forced to exhibit a bit of patience as Black Widow has been pushed back first from this past May, then to November, and now till next May again.
It's never easy these days.
However, if you really just look at it in a big picture perspective, it is honestly a better move for fans, it's a better move for the studio, and on a certain level, which I'll get into, it could even be a better move for theaters in the long run. So I really just see nothing but positives out of these moves.
Managing director Sean O'Connell, do you echo that same sentiment, or are you a little more pessimistic?
Yeah, while I agree with what Eric is saying, and I think ultimately I'm going to agree with a lot of his points, I do sort of want to push back on the notion that Marvel is so organized and structured in terms of how they release their stuff, and these shifts have absolutely got them on their heels. To the point where things that were going to come in a certain order are now being rearranged. Certain shows are jumping ahead of other shows because of production schedules that couldn't be met. And the first thing coming out of the gate after Avengers Endgame, which is the end of the Infinity Saga, is now going to be WandaVision, which I don't think Kevin Feige meant, in any sort of universe. So in a way, I sort of see them scrambling a little bit, and maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe all this stuff plays out, the way that it's eventually supposed to. But I do think they've had to make some decisions they didn't want to have to make, and I'm curious to see how all that's going to shake out.
Oh, this is going to be a gas!
Well, the immediate counterpoint that I'll actually just throw up to that is that Marvel has actually kind of been in a throne state for a couple of years now, and it really all started when James Gunn was first fired from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was originally supposed to be a 2020 release. Then, obviously, he got rehired later. That movie is on the slate, doesn't have a release date. But, I mean, that alone has already kind of thrown things all out of whack as far as, like, production schedules and where things were going to go.
You just want to suck the joy out of everything.
The thing that I point to hard is that Eternals was still in production this past February, and this is supposed to be, like, a massive, giant, like, cosmic blockbuster that involves, like, all kinds of, like, thousands of years of history and extraterrestrials and all this kind of stuff, and they were going to try and get post-production on that work done in 10 months, which is a crazy short schedule, and now, like, with these most recent delays, originally I think it was February it got pushed to after the initial round, but now it's moved to next November, and so instead those 10 months suddenly turn into 22 months, and frankly I don't see how you do anything but use all of that extra time to make the movie even better than it ever was. And also I will say, like, I think at this point, and this is to your other point, Marvel has earned our faith as far as, like, building a larger story. Obviously, they did such an incredible job of that with the Infinity Saga that, like, for these next couple of movies, we don't necessarily need a bunch of crossover. These can kind of be more standalone films that, like, maybe we'll see down the line how they eventually get to something bigger, in the same way that, like, the first Iron Man, first Captain America, first Thor, yada yada, had absolutely nothing to do with Thanos.
I am inevitable.
But the way things are right now, there is a kind of built-in fluidity that I think is working to Marvel's advantage, and it's just a fraction of the reason, to tease what I was saying earlier, why these release date shifts are actually a good thing.
And to that point, I think that maybe a part of the release date shifts and that extended prep period is in order to ensure that fluidity. You know what I mean? Like that could be a move to make sure that everything is lined up. Just so that the audience knows, Black Widow was previously dated for November 6th of 2020, and it's moved to May 7th of 2021. Eternals was supposed to be released on February 12th of 2021. It has been moved to November 5th of 2021. 2021. That's substantial. And Shang Chi, which was supposed to be released May 7th of 2021, is now being released on June 9th of 2021. We have learned with past experiences that delayed release dates are not always a good thing. And I mean, I know that something like New Mutants has nothing to do with the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point in time, but, you know, if that's a testament to what delayed release dates mean for the quality of a film.
Yeah.
I don't think we're here to get better.
Sean, why do you think that some of these delays may result in some shakeups?
Well, here's just a mild concern. And again, I don't think that it's a big deal for anybody who's necessarily in this room. But there's two effects that these delays can have, because by the time, right now, if all the release dates stick, by the time Black Widow plays, it will be 20 months between Spider-Man Far From Home, which is the last technical MCU film, and the next one. And the next one coming up is a prequel that isn't really, you know, as far as we know, pushing the story forward to a certain extent. I think that casual audiences, blockbuster audiences, had gotten into a rhythm of expecting 1 to 2 Marvel movies a year, borderlining on an obscene 3 Marvel movies a year, and it became part of a repetition of things that you looked forward to.
Another!
As they're gone, you know, again, we're all going to line up for them, but I don't know if the urgency is quite there anymore for the Marvel Studios and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, especially when you're coming at it with new characters that we have to sort of teach the general audience to get behind. You know, it's almost like you're losing some real star power, and then you're following up with brand new characters that aren't even really the household name characters, like the Eternals, like Shang-Chi. You're going to get a couple of sequels, but we have to wait even longer for those sequels to come. It's pushing back Thor: Love and Thunder. It's pushing back the Doctor Strange sequel. So these delays, you know, if you put put Kevin Feige on the lie detector test and asked him, hey man, would you want to move up one of those sequels, you know, with a character that, you know, audiences are super invested in, maybe he'd want to do that. I just don't know the reality of being able to do that. So that's a mild concern of mine. A lot of times absence makes the heart grow fonder, you know, and the Marvel audiences will be lined up at the theaters because they haven't seen one in a really long time.
I just really miss him.
But I also just think the flip side could come around, where they sort of say, like, I've been without the Marvel Universe right now. I don't need to necessarily come barreling out for it. So we'll see. We'll see.
I mean, that was kind of something that was another point that I was going to make, and it's kind of another twofold point, which is like, this is going to, on a certain level, teach fans to kind of miss the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That seems so weird in our nostalgia-obsessed culture, and it's, again, been less than 2 years since we've actually seen a film from this franchise. But I think that is kind of going to be an interesting test for Marvel in general. It is noteworthy that, like, I mean, we are still getting, it looks like WandaVision doesn't have an official release date yet, but it does look like it's going to be arriving in December, so that at the very least is going to provide some characters that fans definitely love with a different kind of storytelling, and it shouldn't be a stopgap. It was never intended to be any kind of stopgap to, like, hold us over. I remember you even, Sean, recorded a video saying that you were going through MCU withdrawal. This can be your substitute in the meantime. But the other side of that point, though, and that I think is kind of a really great thing for Marvel, and obviously completely unintended, is the fact that, like, in the last couple of years, Marvel has drilled home so many times, especially into, like, our brains, that the Infinity Saga is meant to be viewed as this era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's self-contained. It's this story that they were telling for more than a decade, and it exists. It's in box sets. It's whatever it is. It's the Infinity Saga. And as great an ending as Endgame provides, and kind of a coda that Far From Home is, that conclusion feels a lot less genuine if less than a year later you have another blockbuster come out. And this loops back to what I was saying earlier about how the initial release date moves I felt were even a good thing to start with, is that, like, just having this distance from the Marvel Cinematic Universe really solidifies in our brains that this was a specific era of the MCU, and what we're doing forward is something new, that they're going in new directions that isn't necessarily designed to look in the past. To echo your point, Sean, I will say it's not. It's never been a truly great thing that the first movie that's kicking all of this off is Black Widow, which again is a flashback movie that brings us back into that. So
yeah,
but
and let me actually say that too, because that's a movie that can't be improved by having more time off.
True.
That is done. It's locked.
Is that what we are?
And so, for all the more reason, now, again, I can only assume that Mulan didn't do what Disney wanted it to do on that premium service, because it really does feel, as much as I would say Black Widow warrants a big screen treatment, that is the perfect film for them to move to Disney Plus, because of just the way that the theaters didn't bounce back the way that everybody had hoped that they were going to. It's a finished film that we keep saying, and I totally agree with Eric, that the productions that are still in some form of post-production or could even benefit from additional shoots, they can move forward in 2021. But moving Black Widow, which is completely finished, all the way to May, it seems like a really long delay for that film in particular, because even if they found a way to play it on Disney Plus, it would allow them to maintain some sort of that moved up schedule, where, well, let's see, that depends if they want to put Eternals ahead of Shang Chi and all that stuff, and I don't know those decisions. But Black Widow still feels like it could come out earlier than that May date that it claimed. I thought that was a pretty bold move to push it back another 8 months from right now.
I'm done running.
The reason why I'm actually kind of satisfied that they've moved it all the way to May is that I don't think that these incremental moving of the goalposts is good for the theater industry. They are gonna, because every single time you do that, every single time you wait until just a couple weeks before a major release date to move something, theaters are gonna have to be prepared for those kind of things. And also, it's just like, theaters right now, like Tenet, I mean, you spoke about Mulan not doing the business that was expected. Tenet isn't doing the business domestically that Warner Brothers expected. It's why Black Widow felt like it had to move. And there's also the issues of the relationship between theater owners and studios, where there is like the profit sharing that comes from tickets and the ratio of how much goes to the studio versus how much goes to the theater in opening weekends. There could be a point where, like, if you have things spread out to a certain point and you only have like one or so blockbusters coming out every single month, you're just eventually going to have theaters operating at a loss, and that is terrible for the industry. That can be good for absolutely nobody. So I honestly, like, rather than moving Black Widow to February and say like, okay, we're gonna do it there, and then by January realizing, oh crap, maybe we're not ready for this kind of big blockbuster release, and then moving it to May, that doesn't help anybody. Just confront the reality, and that's what they did, I feel.
What your plan sucks.
I want to talk about the larger implications of the story of the MCU as a whole. I mean, Eric mentioned that Sean and I recently did a video regarding the Marvel TV release dates on Disney Plus and the way that those shows will tie into the MCU more than Marvel Television ever has before. Do we think that those release date shakeups coming right before these has something to do with them going back to the drawing board and maintaining that continuity in a way?
I don't think so, because of what Eric was talking about, the fact that these projects aren't going to be as closely attached as they have been in the past, you know, trying to weave together a much larger story. And I think that that's smart, honestly. I think that Feige and all the people at Marvel walked a very difficult tightrope of trying to maintain continuity over the course of the Infinity Saga, and by and large they pulled it off. To try and do that again would be extremely difficult, and all of the projects that they're rolling out exist in completely different corners of the universe. So it's cool that they could be their own thing, stand apart, introduce new characters. If you figure out ways to sort of cross them over later on down the line, then fine, you know, if the story organically takes you in that direction. So I think audiences almost are going to have to get used to the fact that the things aren't necessarily building off of each other to a much bigger story, and having the TV side of it to branch off and have a Wanda and Vision 6-part storyline play out, have the Falcon and the Winter Soldier be its own little self-contained thing, and then have the Eternals and Shang Chi and a Black Widow prequel carry things over on the movie side is really beneficial. One thing I want to point out too, that, and again, it's all just a matter of timing and the way that things broke. Could you imagine if this shutdown occurred between Infinity War and Endgame?
I get emails from a raccoon, so nothing sounds crazy anymore.
If this was 2019, not only would it have been Endgame, it would have been Star Wars as well. So yeah, no, that would have been a remarkable disaster. And frankly, I mean, not to get like, this is way too inside baseball, but like this year was never a great year. This year was a mediocre year that only had a handful of exciting blockbusters. But now 2021 has become absolutely stacked because it takes all the movies it had and adds on all the movies that were supposed to come out in 2020.
We'll just call this year a wash, and then...
I will just add to Sean's. I agree with everything he said. The only thing that gives me question at this point in regards to like the larger continuity is the connection between WandaVision and Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, because it's been confirmed that Scarlet Witch is going to be in that film. But this must not be an issue simply because WandaVision was originally supposed to be a 2021 show, and they moved it up to 2020, I think even before COVID. So, it can't be that big of an issue story-wise, but it is interesting that there is that big of a gap in between those two projects being released.
Yeah, that's a huge gap.
Damn it, why?
Let me play devil's advocate for a second, because we're saying, how could we possibly repeat that Infinity Saga continuity the way that they set that up? These are more standalone films. That's not a good thing, because I think a huge part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's success is the fact that there was that connecting thread consistently, and if they depart from that too much, for example, Endgame was the highest grossing movie of all time. Now try to watch Endgame out of context without ever having seen an MCU film. I know I brought my dad and he was like, what the is going on? And that's the highest grossing movie of all time. So that's a huge part of Marvel's success. And I mean, if they're not planning on connecting those in a major way, they better start, because I really believe that.
You know, I think they are. It's just I think what it may be is just that it is a lot more subtle.
We know each other. He's a friend from work.
One thing that I do theorize that they're working on for the future, especially, and the introduction of Kang is kind of something that solidified this, and I have a whole feature that you can read on CinemaBlend if you care to get my full thoughts, is that they are setting up the Young Avengers. You have like the whole thing in Captain Marvel about the introduction of the Kree-Skrull War. That is your gateway to introducing Hulkling. And Cassie Lang, of course, from Ant-Man and the Wasp, is just now she's an adult and can take on the role of Stature.
Yeah.
Kate Bishop is going to be introduced in Hawkeye.
Right.
This is it's become a long list of clues. But the thing is, like, I think they are just kind of playing it quiet for now. Like, they are playing it slow. And then, like, I mean, there isn't an Avengers movie currently on the schedule, so we'll see kind of where that goes. But I feel like the idea of them building a cohesive universe is definitely not off the table. It's just I think they're just playing it in a different way because they can. They've been given the key to the city from fans to fans will show up, and so I think that that's gonna give them some creative liberty.
I also want to point out the fact that there's a couple of significant projects that they have at least announced, and I'm not talking about like casual, hey, we might try this one day, but significant projects including Blade, and the transition of the Fox characters, Fantastic Four and the X-Men, into this universe that now we might not see till 2024, 2025. Like, that's how far out we're kind of looking because of the number of films that they've announced that they have to find release dates for.
How many others are there? Enough.
But I don't see it as anything but a good thing. Every single filmmaker I've talked to has always said there are two resources that every single film needs more of: money and time. And time, money you can work for. Time is a lot harder, and so it I really just and Taika Waititi even was quoted saying as much, that these strict release dates do have their problems. They do have a tendency to hamper you creatively just because you don't have the ability to really think things out and make things as good as they can be. Now they can, and I think that is just spectacular. And I don't want to lessen, obviously, the horribleness of this entire year, but if we are just living in this MCU Marvel Studios bubble,
That's a great point to end on. Sean, do you have any closing thoughts? Has Eric's debate swayed you in any way?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I was basically on Eric's side. I was just playing devil's advocate, but I do want to say that the one point that I agree mostly on is that I hate pre-announced release dates and making filmmakers race to meet them. And if this delay has decimated that alone, then more power to the delay. But I want the Fantastic Four now, for God's sake. I'm impatient.
Sean will swing any conversation back to the Fantastic Four in the MCU.
It's true.
We can be talking about Star Wars, and he'll be like, "But what about the Fantastic Four?" But what do you guys think? Do you think these release date shakeups from Disney are going to impact the MCU in a positive way or a negative way? How are you feeling? Let us know in the comments below. Sean, Eric, thanks for being here, guys.